Everybody can hear me? All right, I'm going to sit here and act like I'm not nervous that I'm on Facebook Live, but just know that I am, and you guys get to see me play talk show host. I'll introduce myself to you all briefly. I'm Delano Johnson. I'm an associate at Reimagine Learning. It's a fund, a new profit, where we work to really reform the K-12 education system and work with entrepreneurs in that space. And I have a lot of small roles in my role as an associate there, but the one I'm most excited about and the reason why I'm here today is that I lead the youth engagement work, where we try to bring young people into the conversation of this about the solutions that affect them. Because I mean, we're in this room because we all believe in the power of youth, and really excited to be a part of this youth activation community, because since yesterday I've been sitting around with these young activators and hearing their truly inspiring stories, and the more I think about it, I just get more and more nervous about being and honored also about the idea that I'll get a chance to moderate this panel. So let's just give it a round of applause for all the youth activators in the room. And I think that are we already live? If we are live, we're already live. So welcome to all the Facebook Live people. You guys are making me really nervous. But I'm here and I'm going to moderate an amazing panel with these amazing young people. So for those of you joining that aren't familiar with youth activation occurs when young people tackle community solutions or community issues by developing solutions in partnership with their peers and with their schools and school districts. So I'm excited to introduce you all to this lovely panel. As they make their way to the stage, please give them a round of applause. So first we'll start off, sorry, I should have told you to wait. First we'll start off with Claire Lou Smith from Education Reimagined and Up for Learning. Thank you for joining us. Next we'll have Moises Urena. We worked on his last name. He helped me out with that one. Give it up for him. Now we have Kimberly from Opportunity Youth United. And finally, Fish Stark from Peace First. Great. So as I mentioned, I've been here since yesterday, and a lot of the work that that the young activators have been doing is working on storytelling and how to articulate their stories of youth activation and to have the most impact and to really speak to why this works. And I'm happy to have this panel of all-stars who I've got a chance to talk to over the last couple of weeks, and really, was truly inspired by all their stories. But also want to say that I could easily close my eyes and point to any young person in this room, and they could also equally be an all-star in their own right. So with that being said, I want to turn it over to Claire to kick us off with the story of your youth activation.
So I'm going to be sharing one specific story today, but I've actually kind of done a lot of different things that have really fed into my interest in continuing to do new things. So when I was in 8th grade, I started working with the organization Up for Learning, which works to help build youth and adult partnerships to make schools more relevant and engaging places, and places where students are involved at the center of their own learning. And so I started doing that, and then I've started sort of connecting with other youth activators around the country, as well as doing work in my own community. I'm a member of my school board and some other kind of organizing things. And today I'm going to be talking about actually a class that I took last year through Middlebury College. And it's called What's the Story? And so it connects young people from a range of ages all around Vermont, so middle schoolers and high schoolers, and they identify a social issue, and then they work with their peers to study that issue really intentionally and then create change. So the issue that we identified, and that actually I identified through sort of some of my other work, was equitable education for English language learners. And so this was a really interesting process because it asked us first to sort of do some preliminary research and look at what's out there, what are people saying about this issue in Vermont, and sort of build our idea of what do we think this issue is and what do we think is the change we need to affect. And then it asked us to go to the stakeholders themselves. So instead of, someone earlier today talked about not coming to people with the solutions, but understanding that the solution is in the room and all the information you need is in the room. And so we interviewed different people. So we interviewed English language learners themselves, we interviewed mentors, we interviewed teachers. I interviewed the State Secretary of Education for Vermont. And so we really tried to get an idea of the broadest picture possible. And this was a really amazing experience for me, especially. It taught me a lot of new things. It taught me, as much as I tried to be cognizant in the beginning of the year, about understanding that what I thought was actually the case in these communities that I didn't really understand was not the case, was probably not going to be the case at all. And what we found was that all of the media that we'd been reading about English language learners in Vermont it was focusing on issues of hate crimes and of prejudice. And when we actually went into the communities, what we found was really the opposite. We found that in a lot of ways, the communities were really welcoming, and we were actually known as being a very safe state, but they had very little visibility. So we actually, one of the other youth that I worked with was interviewing students from school and sort of teaching them about this. And at one point, one of them said, yeah, I think we should have an English language learner program at my school. And it turns out they did and had for years and just had no idea about it. And so what this really taught us was that the issue is often not what you think it is. And so it's really important to take those steps to really understand the issue itself and to go to the stakeholders and actually ask people, these are your communities. What does this look like? What do we need? What needs to change? And to also understand that you're never really done. So what we found was that in areas where there were a lot of English language learners, it was really welcoming, but that's probably because they were high incidence areas and there were so many people so many English language learners there that it was really common and they were able to build a community. And in areas where that wasn't the case and there was maybe one or two scattered in very rural schools, in fact, we couldn't even talk to them at all for security reasons, and we knew that there was something different out there, some different case that we couldn't even have access to. And then, so the other side of this beyond content is that we had to sort of form these own structures by ourselves as youth and figure out how to do all this work for a year, and essentially a year-long research project that we had no experience in, and we had to create all of those systems for organization and structure on our own.
Thank you. So as these students are sharing their stories, feel free to jot down notes because, these are the keepers of the youth activation experience. I think there's a lot of what you just shared. I was like, wow, that's so cool. A curriculum that you like literally chose a project that you had never been involved in and you discovered a passion through that. That's so amazing. So take notes. All right, so next we'll go to Moises Urena from PeerForward.
Hi, everybody. My name is Moises Urena. First, before anything, I want to say hi, Mom, because she's watching. I want to say hi to her. I'm going to be pretty honest. If you told me 4 years ago that I would be flown out to San Francisco to be in the Facebook headquarters to speak, I would have told you it was crazy. My life has been crazy. It all started the summer before my sophomore year. I actually ended up becoming homeless and evicted from our apartment. And it kind of took a toll on me because the first 2 years of high school, I was kind of like, what's my purpose? And then to realize that I ended up becoming homeless, realized well, obviously it's not having a home. But then I realized I had to work harder and harder, and a lot of opportunities were given to me, but I didn't really search for the opportunities. I was blessed, as I have to say. I was really blessed because of PeerForward. That's one thing. It was the biggest blessing of my life because I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And then after I got evicted, I was like, I need to help students find their purpose because I didn't know what my purpose was. And then I created something called 47 Mentors. But before I created that, I went to the workshop with PeerForward, and it was a blessing in disguise. It was one of the greatest feelings in the world. I actually opened up, told my story for the first time, which I never told anybody. And it made me feel powerful, and it made me feel stronger, and made me become a leader that I am today. So after that, I ended up creating a program called 47 Mentors in my high school. So I have seniors mentoring freshmen, because as a freshman, you come into high school and you're like, I don't know what I really want to do. I don't know what I should do. What's the norms? And I wanted seniors to teach them, hey, do this, do that. So, to have just have a friend, at the end of the day, just to have a friend. And I also wanted to give the seniors responsibilities because, they're applying to colleges, applying to financial aid, FAFSA, and that's when it all hit together. Like, I just created a movement because now I have seniors who didn't think they were going to go to college, having somebody look up to them. So now they're applying to colleges, applying to financial aid, getting accepted to colleges, and it really all hit me the day of graduation where a senior came up to me. He said, to be honest, if it wasn't for you, I was never going to go to college or even graduate high school because I wasn't given any responsibility. And I think that was one of the most beautiful things that was ever given to me, was the chance to... Yeah. I feel like my sole purpose is to give everybody else a purpose. So now I'm in high school. I mean, now I'm in college, and everything I'm doing right now, I didn't think I would be doing. I'm an orientation leader, a residential assistant. I help the president out sometimes. I represent alumni. It's like, not to brag, but it's like very surprising if you wouldn't, like my principal was like, you know what, you really surprised me, but you always had it in you. And I always give it to PeerForward, because it really changed my life. It saved my life at the end of the day. It really saved my life. And I'm creating programs to help students find their purpose, and not just, go to school, not to just to, pass your classes, but also to, have somebody there to teach you how to love yourself and how to love others. Because if that's not there, then there's really no reason to keep moving on until you learn how to love yourself, to spread the love. Yes.
Cool. Thank you. What I really love about your story is I just really feel, and I can feel the power of peers in your story, that mentoring program that you created. I can remember me being a freshman going into school and like not really knowing what I wanted to do, and if I had a senior or somebody who would just come take me under their wing. So really cool. All right, Kimberly.
Hey everybody, I guess I'll start with who I am. I am Kimberly Fam. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'll start with who I represent, because many of us are not represented in this room, which we call ourselves opportunity youth, young people who are disconnected from education and employment between the ages of 16 to 24. Not only do I represent those folks right there, I am an Asian person, partly Hispanic as well, living in a Black and brown community. So this is part of who I am, and you'll get to understand what I do. I also serve on our education nomination panel. It's been 17 years without local control, so we just got that back. Philly, we winning. I'm a public servant, a national activist, and I go in a lot of different spaces and work with many different stakeholders. And we do a lot of different things, from touching on concepts of what youth engagement, youth enrichment, and youth elevation looks like, in addition to undoing adultism, having those uncomfortable conversations so we could start to really proceed and implement solutions in our community. I think I'll start with the challenge that I seen in my community as well as in the nation. In the urban centers, especially like Philly, social civics is not a conversation that happens often. It's often happening in those spaces where the schools are resourced. They have the money to really hire those folks to really talk about what civics look like, and what that participation looks like for a young person. So I knew that problem exists not just here in the urban centers, but also through rural communities and tribal and native communities. I'll pause right there because I work with a body of young adults and young leaders from across the nation, about 20 of them, from different geographical locations that face the issue of being an opportunity youth as well. So that's why I'm able to kind of have the scope and lens of outside of this issue just existing in the urban center. Fast forward to 2016, we saw the need to have some type of an event, which we decided to call it the Civic Engagement Summit. We hosted a tri-state summit, basically in Philadelphia, where we had 600 young people come out and learn about what it means to increase civic participation, as well as try to highlight what was happening in the nation, which was the national presidential election at the time, and try to get folks to activate their civic power then, which was voting. From there, long story short, we were able to get 600 of those young people to come out. What was really important for me was to challenge the people that I work with. I get the opportunity to sit on an Opportunity Youth Collaborative. These are folks that are working high level, that have decision-making power over young people, where young people are not often coming to these tables, not engaged on no level. So I am a product of these systems, but also now I'm sitting here with these folks who make these decisions, and I have to have influence. I have to not only show these folks that I'm able to do, but I'm able to also think about these strategies, research them, do the same thing that they do, but if not better, because I'm a person that actually experienced this. So Yeah, long story short, we were able to, I didn't do this alone. I do this with the team, like I said, and we work across networks. So it's all about basically leveraging your privilege, your resources. And this was the time for adults to step back and just use their capital. Some of you have money, some of you have space, some of you have young people. So basically what I was charged to do was look at these different individuals and say, hey, here's what we need from you guys, and could you be able to provide that? I was able to get my district, my school district, which has a not so good narrative about how young people show up there, the community college, in addition to one of our high schools, to convene these spaces and create spaces for young people to actually come and learn about their powers as citizens and what it means to increase civic participation, not just on a voter engagement level, but to value community and to be the ones that build their community. So I'll just end it there.
Thank you. Give it up, Kimberly, I really appreciate you bringing your experience into the room. As a former Opportunity Youth myself, I really appreciate that, and having representation here is really important, so thank you. All right, and last but not least, Fish, start.
Hey folks, I'm Fish. I was really badly bullied throughout elementary and middle school. Right? I was bullied for my speech impediment. I was bullied for my name, which is why I'm introducing myself to you as Fish and not Fortney Hillman Stark III, because I changed it. And I was bullied for my gender expression, right? I wasn't masculine enough, so I was a sissy, or I was a fairy, or I was a girl. It was the kind of bullying that really has you walking on eggshells, even in your own mind, right? Unsure about who you are, who you should be, or how people will react to you. And around me, as I got older, I saw two things. Number one, I saw a lot of young people like me, either who were being bullied or harassed or treated with violence directly, or who more often felt isolated, felt alone, felt excluded, felt that they couldn't be truly and authentically themselves and be accepted within their communities. And the second thing that I saw was a culture that validated and sometimes even supported and encouraged this kind of behavior, this bullying, this walling off, this isolation. I think President Obama put his finger on it best when he gave a speech back when he was a senator, when he talked about what he called the empathy deficit. So I borrow that term liberally from him now, as sort of the root of what is causing this issue that causes so many students to feel alienated, scared, in a place that should be empowering for them. And then we see, that contributes to the skyrocketing rates of mental health issues that we see in young people today, that it really puts a damper on students' achievement because they're not able to focus, they're not able to practice the trust and vulnerability that are necessary to learn. So that was what I saw, and I came into high school really angry. I was angry at a culture and a system that I felt like had failed me, and I was still trying to put those things into words, so all I wanted to do was fight. And for the school leaders and the teachers in the room, I think the lesson in here is probably your best youth activators in the future are the ones right now who are raising the most hell. Right? And eventually I was challenged by some mentors of mine, thank goodness, to think about how I could channel this frustration in a positive direction. And I was talking with some friends about the problem and about all of the well-intentioned anti-bullying education that we have received from teachers that just didn't work. And what we knew was that this was a problem of culture, right? Not a problem of behavior. And what we realized in that moment was adults have a ton of power over how young people behave, but very little power over what they believe. Right? It's peers who have that power. And we saw all this great research about that, and PeerForward is using that to drive a culture of college going, but there's not a PeerForward for empathy or bullying. If there is, you should let me know about it. And so we were like, well, what if we did this ourselves? Like, if we think that students will be responsive to hearing their peers talk about, how do we show tolerance, how do we show care, how do we show empathy to one another, what are we waiting for? Why don't we just go do this? And so we wrote up a curriculum, and we went to just the local elementary and middle school right down the street. And we started teaching. We called ourselves the Teaching Peace Initiative. And to us, peace meant tolerance, it meant care, it meant empathy, and it meant love. And we tried to teach those things, and we tracked what we did, and eventually what we saw was attitudes changing and behaviors changing about how it was okay to treat other people, about how we saw and we heard one another. And eventually we started getting calls. Other schools wanted this, but especially other students wanted this, right? Because for young people, belonging is a matter of survival. There were so many young people that felt really deeply about this, and it felt powerless to move it forward, and here was a solution they could be a part of. And so we started training other students in other schools to do it too. And we were lucky because we had support. We had teachers that cared and that gave a darn and were willing not just to put us on a pedestal, but to really listen and to invest in what we wanted to do. And we were really lucky when I was in college and thinking about how we train other students to connect with an organization called Peace First that really doesn't just believe young people can change the world, but invests in their power to change the world. They connected us to other young people who were working on the issue, like Matthew Kaplan, who's here, that we learned from. They connected us to mentors, they supported us, they gave us coaching, and they gave us money. They put real money in our pockets to make this happen. And what that really did was let us know that there were people who believed in us and who trusted us. And that carried us forward. And now I actually also have the great privilege of working for Peace First. So since graduating college, I work there, and I lead our national youth activation work. So I have the privilege of being both a youth activator and a youth activation professional. I think what's exciting to me about everyone's stories that I just got to hear for the first time and are so amazing is the fact that the youth activation experience is something that is really a catalyst for empowerment for life. And we study at Peace First like what the experience of youth activation does. And it makes young people more engaged in their communities. It makes them more likely to stick with things that are difficult. It makes them more likely to stand up for other people who are experiencing injustice. It makes them feel confident they can see a problem and solve it. It makes them feel more confident in their own skills. And I think it's because, like, as a young person, so much of your life is about what you can't do or what you can't say or who you can't be. And to have this experience where you can be powerful, where you can be mad about something and then you can see it change because of something you did, and you can be heard and you can be seen doing that, that's something that sticks with you for life. That's not something you want to give up. So that's my experience.
Cool. Thank you so much. So there you have it. Those are the powerful stories. 4 very different stories, 4 very different backgrounds with one thing in common. They are all youth activators. And there are 60 different stories in this room with all of the same passion and inspiration embedded within them. So I encourage the adults in the room to please connect with all of these inspiring young people. So in an effort to stay within the theme of this panel, leadership lessons from youth activators, I'm going to move into some questions to dig a little bit deeper into your experiences, if that's okay with you all. And for you all in the audience and on Facebook Live who didn't take my advice and pull out your pen and pad to take notes, now would be the time. So the first question I want to ask is about any challenges you faced in getting this work. I mean, Claire, we could start with you, with your experience with the English language learners in rural Vermont, which I imagine probably wasn't the most popular topic. What are some of the challenges or some of the things you came up against in getting involved in that work?
Yeah, I think one of them is that when you can identify that there's maybe something you don't know a lot about, or that there's maybe an issue or something, but there's not a clear goal. I think that a lot of times when we work on something and there's a goal, it's much easier to craft a plan. But in the real world, a lot of these issues are really complex. Or a lot of the time, so we did interviews with all these people, and so we didn't have statistical data, we had narrative data. And so we had to really learn, if we have all these different stories about experiences that are true and that are real, how do we decide sort of what's the definitive narrative here? What's really happening and what do we need to address? And understanding that there's not really just one truth. There are a lot of different truths that all contribute to one big picture. Also, even though there was some leadership, we really had to create these channels of communication and organization for ourselves. So there were 3 high school juniors and 2 middle schoolers doing this work together throughout the year. And we had an adult mentor, but essentially we would like meet in person every month or so. And beyond that, we went to 4 different schools all around the state. And so it really asked us to do something which young people aren't often expected to do, which is a lot of really hard, sustained work over a long period of time. And a lot of it was sort of on our own time. We didn't have the same schedules. We didn't all have like a period built into our schedule for this or anything. So it really asked us to sort of step up our communication skills. It asked us also to reach out to adults. I had to email the state secretary of education and ask for an interview and all these things and take all these steps that we're not expected to take. Which I think is really important. And I think we were sort of talking about this earlier in one of the groups here, is that when you're leading this or really doing this kind of work, one of the things that you need to do is take all the space you're given. So whenever you have an opportunity to talk about this, to talk about equity or justice, to talk about youth activation, you should, but also understanding that the next step to that is taking the space that you're not given. So making new spaces for yourself and other people to talk and find those areas. And so a lot of it is really sort of finding where's that new boundary with adults, where traditionally adults have all the power in all these situations. And adults really set the tone, they set the narrative, they decide who's invited to the table. And I think that in the best instance of this work, adults start to examine that in themselves and understand where can I step back and say this is where students need to come in, and students need to also have the support and the agency to say we want to be at this table, or we need to be here, or this is a step we need to take even though it's not expected of us.
Thank you. Cool. So Moises, we had a chance to connect last week, a couple weeks back, and what I thought was super interesting about your story was how you talked about the challenge of getting your other fellow seniors involved in it. Can you talk a little bit about that, and also whatever other issues you may have came up against? But I really want to hear, or want the audience to hear a little bit about that.
The hardest part was getting other seniors to take part in my plan, because I told them, like, you want to mentor freshmen, and they just looked at me like I was crazy. And they're like, what? I don't want to do that. And I was just like, all right. So thankfully I got a group of 5 people just starting off, and we each got a freshman, and we just like, people started to see like how close we started to get together, how like the friendship grew and became like a family. And other people were like, hey, so where's my mentee? And I was just like, well, okay. So then after that, after a while, it was like a domino effect. One person got a mentee, and then people started seeing how that mentee was improving and how the student was improving. So my principal was like, you know what? Give every senior a mentee. So I was just like, oh, all right. So even if they wanted it or not, I started giving them mentees. Yeah. And we had these freshmen walking up to seniors like, hey, you're my mentor. And then they're just like, excuse me? And it actually worked out for the better, because they were like, well, all right, I guess I'm stuck with you. So they started teaching. Yeah. They were like, I guess I'm stuck with you. So they started teaching them like what to do, because our school was very small, so the staff is very small. So the seniors already knew the staff, and they tell them like, they talk like this because they care for you. This is how they react. This is how they're going to react if you do this. And the community ended up getting very stronger, and I saw it before my eyes, because that's one thing that our school used to complain about, how after like my freshman year, when seniors left, the community was very like empty. But coming together and seeing that happen my senior year, like it brought tears to my eyes, because I already saw like a family being created. And we even go back to their graduations. For the past 3 years, I've been going to the graduations and seeing everybody graduate who was a mentee, and they have mentees and they go back for their graduations. And before, everybody used to bring like 2 people to the graduation. Now it's always packed out with mentees and mentors, which is beautiful.
All right. Great. Cool. So, Kimberly, we also had a chance to connect, and I thought the fact that you got your school district involved and were able to get the community college and the high school all involved in it, I was floored by that, and I asked you, like, how did you do that? Like, what was that? And you dropped a gem on me that I thought was really important. If you remember it, it was the power of the ask.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's why I'm like, oh, that was fuzzy. It is, yeah. So, like I said earlier, the importance of recognizing your privilege. Sometimes we as young people, we get so focused on, oh, I'm young, I don't have nothing, I'm powerless. No. You got to understand the dynamic of being in these spaces and who these people are sometimes. And I recognize that I'm on the Opportunity Youth Collaborative, sitting with our decision makers. And these folks have resources. And it's as simple. You're either going to get a yes, you're going to get a no, I'm going to look into it, some maybes, and that's it. And just losing that fear of asking someone, not being scared of that person's title, getting caught up in the title. That's where I think we struggle at, is that folks get so hung up in titles that you start to feel like you're littler than someone. And that's one thing that the folks I work with, they treat me as an equal counterpart. So I don't never have to feel that power dynamic that someone is looking below me or someone is looking at me. I'm working beside these folks. So it's as simple as an ask. So just losing that fear of that I'm nothing, these folks have all these decisions, and just feeling like you're going to burn out your relationships. And you just have to be real with these folks. I think the importance of building those relationships is really a key part of the process, that these folks know who you are. I'm a student. I'm not full-time, just one thing. I do many different things, and these folks know that, so not burning out yourself in addition with burning out relationships, and not being scared to ask the folks who say they support you. Because if they support you like they say they do, then when it's time to get some things done, just like when they're calling me to look at RFPs and go to this program and do that over here, is the same way when I'm asking for some type of favor that you can support me in return.
There we go. Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you. Fish, any challenges with expanding your program to other schools and districts? Or?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for me, and I'm looking at my fellow youth activators in the audience to see if it resonates, is just sometimes sometimes it would happen when I would wake up in the morning. Sometimes it would happen when I was about to send an email. Sometimes it would happen when I was about to have a conversation with someone in power. Just the pit in your gut that says, this is not my place. I should not be doing this, right? I'm seeing people nodding. I'm hearing people snapping. I feel like that might be constant. Because we live, we live in a culture that at its worst tells young people they are to be seen and not heard. And even at its best often tells young people that they are the future. Which is you think of that as an empowering statement. But when you tell a young person they're the future, you're making a negative statement about their possibility right now. You're telling them you are going to be an incredible leader someday. You're going to be an incredible leader someday. You're going to be an incredible change maker or superintendent or rock star or physicist someday. But right now you don't have a contribution. Right now your job is to sit down and learn so that you can do that then. And those tropes, those things are what make the pit in your stomach happen. And often that has held me back from opportunities, right? Sometimes that has shut me up and sat me down and made me not reach out as far as I could, to the detriment of my work and to the detriment of the change that I'm hoping to create. What I have done to try and counter that is to reach out to adults and allies and supportive systems that have challenged my thinking, that have always pushed me to be better, to work harder, to be more in line with my values, and to think about best practices, right? Have not treated my idea like it was precious just because I was a young person, right? But also didn't make me prove that I needed a seat at the table. That believed in me, but also believed me, and that my experience was valuable, and that I had something to say and to share that they could learn from. And what I would say to the adults in the room, the advice I would give is, how do we support youth activators, is that it's not enough to validate. And I don't mean to, I want to be very careful here, because I don't want to say that words and support don't matter, because they do. Right? It's so important to say to a young person, I'm really proud you're doing this work, or your idea matters, or I believe in you, or this is great. But what really matters is when that validation is coupled with investment. When you say this matters, and so I'm going to do this to help bring it to life. I'm going to put the chips down. Because when you have that validation without the investment, young people wonder sometimes, well, how much do you really mean it? And so young people don't just need your praise, although they do need your praise. They need time on the agenda, right? They need money in the budget, and they need a seat at the table. So that is what, that's what I would say.
All right. Thank you, Fish. And I think you just led us to my final question with the interest of time. So if we could start, we'll work backwards this time to break up to go in a line. We'll start with Kimberly with the advice that you would give to either the students in the room looking to engage in deeper youth activation work or the adults in the room that want to support students doing youth activation work. Any advice?
For everyone in the room, for my peers, don't get hung up on the word youth. You're an activator regardless of what phase and stage, development, whatever they want to call it, in your life. And you hold yourself accountable as well as your peers. I think that's the part we start to let go of, is the accountability piece. You know, because you're my friend, I'm going to let you ride. You're not going to do some things. No. In order to change practices and behaviors, we have to hold ourselves accountable in addition to the folks we have around us. So if you're on my team and you're trying to get we're trying to get some things done, then we have to hold each other accountable. And that's the same way in the adult spaces, that folks have to start to hold each other accountable for those strategies we come up with, for those best practices that we do know work, in addition to creating those opportunities to allow young people into your spaces and meeting young people where they are. Stop telling us to meet you at times we're not able to meet you at, when you know we're in school, we're doing other things. Please create that flexibility for us to learn about one another and what we can do to really create impact and progress and results around issues that have been going on too long. It's been 50 years, 22 days, if I'm correct, since one of the greatest leaders have died in this country, Martin Luther King. And we're still talking about the same issues. They're still talking about the same gaps. So we have to change that narrative. I'm going into my generation, my first generation, my 30 years soon. And that's going to be the same for my following generation. And I just want to make sure there's a different story for when I have kids, that we're still not talking about equity and equality, that we're at a liberating place, that folks feel liberated.
All right, great. Moises, final words of inspiration, words of advice for the folks in the room and the folks joining us live.
For me, it's just to be humble and just love everybody around you. Even if somebody doesn't love you back, just give them love, because that's what the world needs, just love and to be humble. Because I came from a place where I'll say a very dark place, and I could have turned out different, but I kept that pure in my heart. And I got to thank my mom for that too, but I came from that, I just took the pureness from my heart and I spread it around, and to see everybody else happy makes me happy, and to see everybody just humble themselves and take care of one another, that just makes my heart so big.
For young people, I would say understand and start to embrace that you are experts. I think in school a lot of times, especially when teachers stand up and try to teach us stuff and we're just supposed to sit down and accept it, it teaches us this ingrained idea that they're the experts, they know things, and we don't. And that's just not true. Especially just by virtue of being a student, you're an expert. You're an expert in school, you're an expert in how it works and how it doesn't. And so especially at school, you're entitled to a seat at the table. And your schools will be the better for it. So with young people involved, a lot of the reason I think that a lot of educational change for the past decades hasn't worked is because it's been for students, but nobody ever asked students if they thought that it would work for them. And nobody ever asked students what they needed. So for young people, understand that not only is it important for you to be at the table, but the best changes will come when you are there and giving your voice. And then for adults, like Fish said, it's not enough just to ask students what they think. When you're doing that, you need to prepare yourself to understand that what they say may not be what you want to hear. So they may not be validating the changes that you want to make. They may not be reinforcing ideas you have. And it's almost more important to listen to them when what they're saying isn't what you want to hear, when it's something that's outside of the narrative, or when what they say is going to force you to change your own plans. And you need to understand that that's when it's especially important to listen to them, because if what they're saying sort of diverges from what you're thinking, then it's really worthwhile to listen to them, and to understand that by listening to them, your own work will become enriched and become much more important.
All right. Let's keep the round of applause going for all of our panelists today. We can turn up a little bit. Thank you. Thank everyone so much. We survived the Facebook Live, so shout out to y'all for carrying me through that, because I'm over here dying. And thank you everybody for joining us. So yeah, we'll just end the Facebook Live. This concludes our live production. And it's an awkward silent moment after that. All right, one more round of applause for the panel. Thank you guys so much. So before I transition,